Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Welcome to FPL Wire Extra Time, powered by DreamSetGo and Fantasy Football Scout. Today, we are joined by a very special guest who has been doing the impossible, predicting Pep. LR, why don't you introduce him?
Very good friend of ours, Luke Disable. He's actually number one in the champion FPL game at the moment right now. So he does have some fantasy pedigree as well. And in the top 1,000 in Sky at the moment, Luke.
Yeah, in and around top 1,000. Yeah, I can't remember offhand, but it's close.
And what he's been doing this season, I was talking to him a little bit earlier, and he's like, everybody wants to avoid Pep, like our friend Zofar here, because it's difficult to predict Pep. And Luke has been predicting Pep very, very accurately all season. He's been having a Hawkeye vision on Man City, what they're doing, their sort of play style, etc. And a lot of people in the community are on free hit, and City play Everton away, and a lot of people have question in terms of who are the best three City assets to pick. And we thought, why don't we just get Luke on? Because his average when it comes to predicting Pep this season, if you take the goalkeeper out, is close to 9.5 out of 10 correct picks every week. Luke, is that right?
Yeah, that's the average over the season. So obviously, some weeks you might dip a little bit below and get. I think probably my worst is probably 8 in a week. But obviously a few 11s buff it up, and then usually around 10. Usually there's always, I mean, it's Pep at the end of the day. There's usually one that slips by the wayside. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. It has definitely been a little bit easier this season, I think, in general. Just the nature of some of the injuries, the form of some of the players has helped Pep, as he always says. He picks his players on form and he doesn't rest players. He's quoted as saying it himself, and they've made it a lot easier for him because the same players have consistently performed pretty much throughout the season. There's been periods where that's changed. Mahrez, for example, was very poor to start the season, despite being nailed on because they had a lot of injuries, and he was straight out of the team because he wasn't good enough. And he's obviously come back in recent weeks, and he's been performing very, very well. And here he is. Most weeks there's obviously exceptions. We have Spurs this week, and the tactical plan meant no Mahrez. There was no room for him. So there's always those little caveats that are applied to his selections, as we know.
Before we dive into the matchups this week versus Everton, how did you start doing this? I know Emma jumped the wave as well. She's been helping with prediction models based on fan forums as well as Man City experts slash fans. How did this whole thing come along?
Yeah, to me, to be honest, it was just I think the end of last season really tainted the minds of people, because Man City were all over the place. The league was already won. Very much the focus was on the Champions League. And as a result, his selections were all over the place. So it really frustrated people. They didn't want to pick their players. Sometimes with Man City as well, they can win 5-0 and you've got the guy who got a 10-minute cameo, and you just picked the wrong option. But for me, I really wanted to give myself a puzzle. I like to make stuff hard for myself, as you probably know in the style I play fantasy football as well. Always try to do something different. And for me, it was like a puzzle to try and work out because I wasn't happy to accept the fact that, probably the best team in the league who are favourites to win, and I've got lots of decent fantasy options that are all very well priced as well, considering what they would be if they were nailed, were just like unselectable to some people. And a lot of people thought they were unselectable. So I wanted to try and give it a go to say, well, I don't think that is the case. I think there is options here. And, it's proved to be the case, I think, this season so far, at least. That was the aim, just to try and figure it out really, and sort of test myself to see whether I could get close to predicting it. And it's gone better than I expected, to be honest. I didn't expect to do as well as this.
Yep, it's been great. And before we jump into the actual discussion, I just wanted to introduce a schedule that City have now ahead of game week 27. They have no midweek game prior to the Everton fixture. Then they have the FA Cup game against Peterborough on Tuesday. Then the derby against Manchester United on Sunday, and then the Sporting tie where they're already 5 goals up.
So you have to think the first team comes into play in both the Premier League matches, given the results at the weekend as well. Now, if Liverpool play their full contingent of games, they're just 3 points behind City, and we have a title race in our hands.
Yeah, I agree with that. The thing is, what is the first team? Because their team's so good, right? So there's always that element to it. But and also, I think Pep will go stronger than most people expect in even those other games because he's done that all season. He's played a lot stronger teams in the cup than people expected. He's played a lot stronger teams in Champions League games where they were heavy favourites. I mean, even the first leg of Sporting. Full team 5-0. The B team probably could have done the same. I know it's a bit different because it's towards the knockout stages now. But Club Bruges, for example, earlier in the season, people were saying, well, they can win that out of Cancer. They're not going to put out their full team. They might rest a few names, but it wasn't really like that. And I think there's been a number of cup games as well where their full team's been out. I'm not saying, therefore, he's not going to play his strongest team in the Premier League, but I would expect he'll pick a strong team in all of them because Man City want to win every competition. It's very clear. They keep saying it, and I don't disagree with that. I think they'll put out a number of strong names in that Peterborough game. But yeah, we obviously don't need to worry about that one too much. It's about the Everton one, isn't it?
Speaking about strong names, you have a predicted 11 for us. So why don't we get into that first before we get into the good picks? Couple of surprises in your predicted 11 that I saw there. What's the thinking there, Luke?
Yeah, and I think it doesn't really make sense if you're going for a high average across the season to go for wild punts of who you think will come in, because across many games, obviously the likes of Diaz, who's not there, is going to play the vast majority of games. So as a predictor who's trying to get a high average rating, you're not really focused so much on the individual game. You're thinking, well, if I put Diaz every week in, I'm going to get 33 out of 38, and that's going to bump my total, right? But I think, as Pep keeps saying, his mantra is, I go on form first. I think that's true. I think at least the form in his mind of the players, who's not let him down, who's not caused any errors or anything. And then he looks at the opponent as well, secondly. This is before rest and rotation to me, and a plan for them, which he very much had a plan for the Spurs game, I think. So I think I've only seen, so the caveat to this, I've only seen the highlights of the Spurs game because I was working. I watched extended highlights, 11 minutes, and I've read some reviews and stuff. And from what I saw, Diaz was pretty ropey in the game, and it's been a thing of him this season. He's not been up to the standard. He's still been very good, don't get me wrong, but there's been a few games where he's been iffy, and we've seen Diaz drop out a number of times as well. In fairness, usually around the Champions League, but not always. So for me, his performance was pretty poor. Even in the offside goal, he was not in the right position. I think in all three, Laporte wasn't great either. I mean, let's not get it wrong. This is a hard time to pick Man City now because, like I talked at the beginning, the form has meant that the same players keep picking. So you come to me now after a game when they've just lost for the first time, and the performance of a lot of the players was actually poor. So it does make it a lot trickier than what people are probably thinking because there's a lot of injuries. They're thinking, well, it's just going to be the first team. Well, how much is he going to punish those players? And I think Diaz is probably one of the ones who's in line for it. My only caveat to that is he does think about the opponent, right? And Calvert-Lewin, everyone knows what his main threat is from Everton and his aerial threat. I know they haven't been great. How much will he put an onus on trying to counter their plan rather than pick the form player? And that's always the tricky balance with Pep. Because to me, Diaz is more of the fighter, right? He's more of the aerial player than Stones. Stones is more of a ball player, a little bit quicker on the ground. So you think Diaz is a better matchup for Calvert-Lewin? I would. But at the same time, Diaz was very, very poor. I think Stones deserved a chance. He's been fantastic every time he's taken to the field. So it's a little bit of a punt there. The bottom line is I wouldn't pick Diaz or Stones. That's the message here. I wouldn't pick even. So I think that is one of the risk positions. So I think Stones has got a chance, but it could easily be Diaz just to cope with Calvert-Lewin. I think the rest of them is pretty settled at the back. I don't see any reason for any of the other guys to change. He doesn't like Zinchenko when the opponents are strong, potentially like against Burnley, against Brentford. It was the same thing. So it's going to be Cancelo and Walker at the fullbacks, I would have thought. Sometimes he has a plan. For example, he brought in Ake at left back when he played Burnley for a little bit of strength at extra set pieces, which you might think Everton's main threat, right? And then he played Stones at right back instead of Walker when they played against Brentford because he thought Tony was going to play, and that's where he drops into that area. Obviously, Tony didn't end up playing that game, but Stones played fantastic anyway. I can't really see any of that happening there unless he's really worried about Calvert-Lewin. I don't think he really needs to be.
Just while we have you here, and this is something not specific to this game week, but to more the captaincy conversation when City do have a prime fixture, is Cancelo better as an FPL asset on the left or a right?
Yeah, that's really tricky because I think historically it was the right. He was always better, and he's obviously a more natural right back. He's right-footed. In either case, he just drifts into the inside positions in midfield, whichever side he plays on. Very rarely becomes the outside right back. And yeah, historically, it was always the right back that he was better at. But I think over time and playing that role so well, he actually works equally well. And if not, there's an argument to say it's even slightly better at left back now. I mean, Pep's been quoted in the last 2 weeks actually saying, in fact, last game in the Premier League, that Cancelo was their best winger from that spot. And his through balls from those positions as well, when he brings the ball into midfield, because he's obviously got the whole pitch in front of him from the right-hand side with your right foot, you can pick out better through balls. And his through balls are definitely better from left back. And obviously, there's a goal threat. If you're cutting inside with your right foot, you've got a goal threat as well. I don't think there's much in it. I think he's fantastic in both positions now.
Right. Let's talk about the attack there. And a big call. Somebody who's not been dropped all season. You think he's going to be benched for this game?
Yeah, I know. Again, another bit of a punt, really, and this is just based on the fact that Gundogan deserves a chance. He's been left out for quite a lot of games actually in the last sort of 6-7 weeks. Kevin De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, very much been the favoured centre midfield partnership. Obviously, when he has a special plan like Spurs, he can mix it up. I think again, I didn't watch the game, but from what I understand, Bernardo Silva played a bit of a false nine role, and Gundogan obviously brought into centre midfield. He played well again. He played pretty well. He's one of Gundogan's better players in the ratings. You know, he obviously scored the goal as well. Bernardo Silva's not had a rest for a long time. I know Pep doesn't really do the resting, but I think if you're going to reward form, it's Gundogan, and Kevin De Bruyne just seems to be, ever since he's come back from his injury, he's played every game. So there's only one spot really for him in the team, unless he wants to mess around with the front three, which again could be a possibility. But I don't see the need against Everton. But it's one of Gundogan or Bernardo Silva. Again, similar to the Stones and Diaz thing, this is the other risk position. I'd love to say go for Gundogan because I think his XGI is actually higher than any other player over the course of the season. But I just wouldn't do it because it could very easily be Bernardo Silva, and he's played every game, like you say, when he's been available. I think he missed one game with a slight back knock, and then he came on anyway, if I remember rightly. It was the other way around. But yeah, he's been pretty much a nailed-on person. The bottom line is I wouldn't have Silva or I wouldn't have Gundogan because I'm not 100% sure. But Gundogan, if you're willing to take the risk, he's obviously a very good pick.
And let's talk about the front three there. I mean, it almost picks itself here, but no worry at all about Foden being in the limelight of late.
Yeah, he obviously had that fight thing that everyone's seen. It's hard to gauge that because we've seen Grealish and Foden get dropped as a result of a night's out in town. We don't know the full details, but they were obviously dropped after that. And Foden has, to my knowledge, started every single game that he has either not been punished for or has been fit. So it's hard to say that he'll suddenly be out because I don't know if you've watched the video or seen it. It didn't look like he did too much wrong. Looks like he got targeted. I think a number of the Man City players were out on that fight night as well. It wasn't like it's just him going out or anything like that. The only thing in my mind would be, you know, the old thing, well, don't put yourself in that position, don't go out there. But then you're telling a kid who's 20 years old to not go and enjoy himself when half the other Man City team are out. So we're never going to know what the conversation is there. You just have to know there is a slight chance that if Pep doesn't like what he's seen for whatever reason, then Foden could be victim of, well, I don't like you going out and causing a scene and bringing, at the end of the day, you're bringing the reputation of the player, the club into disrepute, aren't you, by going out? So there is always that chance that could happen. If it's purely based on the football, I can't see any reason why Foden wouldn't play this game. As I said, he's played every other game. He's not been his usual self of late. He's been a little bit worse, and he's tired in a few games as well. So there's an argument play-wise you could maybe give him a break, but we've just seen the fixture list. There's no reason for him to play the next game, and they need to win. So I can't see him dropping out for any other reason apart from Pep doesn't like the video, which how can you predict that, right? I don't think it's going to be a thing.
Would you worry at all about? We're doing this and recording this video before Pep's press conference, but let's say Grealish and Gabriel Jesus are fit. I mean, my presumption would be that he would give them minutes in the cup and not in the league game. Would you worry at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because they were due back last week, weren't they? Or very, very close to it, and they just missed out. And I think even the week before that, he talked about it as well. I don't think they'd play this one particularly. I think Jesus is got more of a chance because he actually hasn't played a lot of football for a long time. And he's actually used Jesus when I was looking, because I looked through previous opponents, and obviously it's hard to gauge because you don't know what the game state at that time was, who was injured. I haven't gone into it that much detail, but Jesus has played against Everton quite a lot. But we're talking different managers, different setups. So how much you can take that on board, I'm not sure. So he would be a slight worry, and also he is, you know, at least on paper, I know he's played right wing a lot this season, the only real natural pure centre forward they're supposed to have in their team. So he's always going to be a slight risk. But I'm with you. I think it's more likely that if he's only just come back from injury, probably gets the last 20 minutes and then probably plays the cup game. That would be, and this is, I mean, Pep may say he's just ruled out entirely, right? But based on what we've got now, I think that would be the case. For me, I think that means Foden is probably a slight worry for minutes this week. Again, I think that come the 70th minute mark, especially if they're cruising, I think he may give, and let's bear in mind, Grealish also has played centre forward a lot this season. I would say that Foden is more likely to see sort of 70 minutes and Grealish or Jesus come on. Obviously, that could be for the wingers, depending on the performance of the game state. But at the moment, that's what I would guess at.
Yeah, our job is to predict, and we're not sitting on the fence here with the predictions. Right then, so if you want to dive into some numbers before we ask Luke who his favorite three are in terms of Man City picks.
Let's do that. But first, I think just for our audio listeners, I'm just going to read out the entire lineup. We have a lot of guys who do listen on audio. It's Edison in goal, Cancelo, Laporte, Stones, Walker. In midfield, Rodri, Gundogan, and De Bruyne. Up top, Foden, Sterling, Mahrez. Just a
Yep.
quick before I jump into
Sterling.
the numbers, I just want to talk about Sterling. It's a little because you saw he was substituted the last game around the 67th minute with City chasing the game. Does that concern you a little bit?
I don't think so. I think again, I didn't watch the full game, so it's hard for me to judge on his performance. But at least on the ratings that people have given him, I don't think any of them played particularly well. But I think he was probably one of their more threatening players. And with Sterling, we know his fitness recovery is good. We know that he can play all three front positions. So even if this is often the thing we're predicting Pep, right? If you get one wrong, sometimes you get two or three wrong because he takes obviously left-footed, right-footed, inverted wingers, all of that into account, how he wants to approach Everton. So if you get one wrong, you can get numerous wrong. But the great thing about Sterling is he plays all those front three positions, right? If he wants to play Sterling on the right wing because he wants to target that Kenny might be playing at left back and he's right-footed, which would be more suited to Mahrez, who cuts in, and maybe he wants to go on the outside, then obviously Sterling can play there. He can also play centre forward if he wants to give Foden a naughty, break or whatever. And he's also the person on the left wing at the moment. Foden could obviously go there if he wants to stretch the game the left foot. So it's hard to leave Sterling out whenever you predict the team, really, even if there's a slight worry that they were chasing the game. I think it's just to change it up at the end of the day. I think it was as simple as that. And I expect he'll probably play this one again.
Yeah, it's just Pep overcomplicating things when big games come, because Sterling's good run of form has come on the left hand side, and Mahrez's good run of form has come on the right hand side. So I don't know. He has a tendency to do this in big games, and more often than not, sort of overcomplicates it. I'm with you. I'm expecting Sterling to play on the left, and I think he's a better FPL asset on that left hand side because he likes to cut in and shoot on that right foot. So I think his goal threat increases a lot on that side. Would you agree, Luke?
I'm not too sure. I mean, a lot of the City fans, a lot of the groups, they love him on the right-hand side. The problem is can only play that position, and he's been so good there. But they generally really like him on the right-hand side. I think that's been his better position historically. Like, really good for Liverpool there as well. Really good for Man City in his seasons where he scored 20 goals. But when he has played on the left in recent weeks, he's looked really, really good there as well. He's just been great in general. And we all know Sterling's game. He tries to get there for the tap-ins as well, doesn't he? So he's very much the man on the end of stuff quite a lot. And when you look at that lineup there, yeah, Mahrez can get the odd goal, but generally cuts in and crosses it with his left foot for people at the back post, and that's where Sterling in this formation would be. And if not, he's floating around this. Scored that header the other day from point blank range. It's his game, isn't it? So he's very much the sort of tries to be the tap-in merchant, but obviously he's also got those worldy shots in him. Apparently, I don't think many people back Sterling for the kind of goal he scored the other day, but he can score those as well. So I think he's just the safest and a great goal for it.
And worth pointing out that we have crosses coming from De Bruyne as well on that right hand side, who's likely to play in the right midfield position, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is where, again, if you get one wrong, if Bernardo Silva with his left foot, he wants different angles from different people. If he's got Sterling with the right foot there, he's got Cancelo with the right foot. That's two right foots on the left. Maybe he puts Bernardo Silva with his left foot on the left side so they can have multiple angles. And again, it's probably Gundogan's a bit of a pump. Maybe that happens to give all those different angles. These are all the things that he considers. But in terms of the front three, at the end of the day, unless Grealish comes back into the team or Jesus, which it doesn't look likely with the information we've got right now, it's hard not to see a place for Sterling in the team.
And Mahrez, just a quick before we jump into the numbers, very confident on him starting?
I'm pretty confident in him because he's been fantastic of late. I think for Spurs, it was a clear plan. Everyone knows that Spurs' left-hand side, he would have maybe planned for Reguilon anyway, because he had COVID, I think, in the end, so he may not have known that he was out. But in any case, Sessegnon, they always attack from that side. And then obviously you got Son, who drifts over to that side. And you could tell he was very mindful of that. You could see Walker's obviously going to play there for the count of the pace, and he wanted someone who's better at tracking back. So he was willing to drop his most informed player, really, Mahrez, in order to get someone who is more likely to track back and help out defensively. As soon as they brought Mahrez on, they looked like a better threat. Now, might because they're chasing the game or whatever. But I can't see any reason why you wouldn't play Mahrez in this game. I mean, there's no you rest him to play in the cup, and it just doesn't make sense to me. I think he starts. I can't really see an argument of why he wouldn't play. I think he's pretty much nailed on. Especially as well, he does like the right foot on the right side of your versus a back five, and Spurs play that back five to get around the defence. Everton play a back four, as far as we know, will play a back four, so that's not even in the conversation here either. I just can't see any argument where Mahrez doesn't play. Famous last words, Pep, like I say, but I think he's pretty secure.
Got it. Let's just jump into some numbers. This table is from our friends at Above Average FPL. In terms of points per game, Mahrez leads the way with 9, De Bruyne second with 7.5, Sterling in third. In terms of shots, he's up there too. 2.7 for Mahrez, 2.25 for Sterling. But what's interesting is the key passes for Sterling is so low, 0.88. With Mahrez, you have 2.14. So Mahrez has a bit of both goal and assist threat.
I lost him on the video there. I'm not sure if he's still there.
But yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's completely
Yeah.
disappeared off my screen for some reason. But anyway,
LR, can you see me, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I
so-
can see Zoff and I can see Luke as well. So what I'll do is I'll try just making sure that there is a conversation between both of you happening. Go on, Luke. You were saying.
I was just going to say, yeah, I actually noticed that on the stats as well, that Sterling's assist threat's right down. If you looked at his expected goal involvement, his expected assist is not particularly high. And I don't really think there's a key reason apart from, like I said before, he's trying to be the man that gets on the end and make things happen more than anything else. And that's more about his game at the moment, which, goals for midfielders are good for us, right?
Yeah, and he's naturally right-footed, right? And he's been playing mainly on the left-hand side this season. So it's more about goal threat, which is what stands out in the big chances per game. He's top at 1.25 compared to everyone else. So, him and Mahrez are hogging the big chances when it comes to Manchester City. That's what stands out to me.
Yeah, and Sterling, that's always been Sterling's game, right? He's great at getting chances, even if he's perceived to not be great at finishing them all the time. He always puts himself in the right position, and that's why he's just a great fantasy asset, because he's some days he's going to score 3 out of those 3 chances that he gets, and that's why he's got that hat-trick potential, right?
So he'd definitely be on your free hit if you were free hitting.
I think so. I think for me personally, I've got Mahrez and Sterling. I think Mahrez is close to almost non-negotiable just because I think he's pretty nailed, like I say, and he's obviously got the penalties. He's also one of the cheapest ones. He's also, I know it's away from logical reasons, but it's not often you get to own Mahrez because you never know whether he's going to play a lot of the time. So it's quite fun to have him. So I will add that in. I think it's important. And his expected goal involvement out of all the players, I think, was second only to Gundogan, actually, from when I looked, or maybe even above him. Certainly the highest. So it makes sense, from an analytical point of view as well, to have him. And I think the next one it's harder. I mean, De Bruyne's obviously great because even though his numbers are a little bit less than everyone else, we all know that bonus points are a factor in FPL, and his creativity means that he only has to get one return, and he usually gets a lot of points. That's why you can see his points per game is actually really high there. He basically, if he does anything, he's probably in line for bonus. So he's still great. He's also probably the most nailed. So if you really just want to say, oh, I definitely want to be, have a nailed player, then I can't argue against De Bruyne at all. Sterling for me is just the more explosive option. He's more nailed than some of the others, and Foden's great as well because of his price. At the end of the day, I don't think there's a complete. I have to go this one. For me, it's Mahrez and one of those 3. And I know it's a bit of a fencing, but for me, I just slightly prefer Sterling than all the others. I couldn't argue against Foden or De Bruyne though.
Why? Because of explosive potential. That's basically what it would be.
Pretty much it. And then obviously Foden, we've slightly got that, maybe the video issue a little bit tired, maybe comes off on the 70th minute. Sterling plays all 3 positions, so to me, slightly more secure. And then, for De Bruyne, I just prefer the person who's in front of the goal, especially in a game like this where they're supposed, I think I was looking at it in their last 9 games, Man City against Everton. I know there's different opponents, and one of them is in the FA Cup out of those 9. They've scored an average of 2.9 goals across those 9 games. There's been the last 2 games were 3-0 and 5-0. Now, I want the guy who's right near the goal in those instances, which is more likely to be Sterling than it is to be De Bruyne. Not that De Bruyne can't get a haul, of course he can. And the fact that penalties have been taken away from De Bruyne is a slight negative for him as well, I think.
Yeah, and we always talk about Lampard meets Keane on this pod, where the guys who play defense for Everton are not really that good, and Lampard isn't known for his defensive tact as a manager. Given that, would you at all be tempted to triple up on their attack on the free hit and ignore Cancelo?
I would be tempted because it's more of a fun thing to do that you wouldn't do outside a free hit, and I have got nothing against that. At the end of the day, if you win the lottery and it is one of those 5-0 games, then you're probably laughing. The only thing for me is Cancelo is as good an attacker, if not better, than some of the other guys, and he's just playing for defence, and he's also got the chance to get a clean sheet. So I can't look away from Cancelo. I just love him so much. So for me, Cancelo is like a lock. I wouldn't even consider not having him, but I can understand at least why you would. And just a very brief note on those defenders as well. Those are the kind of centre backs for me that will not be able to handle the likes of Foden as false 9, pulling them out. And that's why I think Foden's most likely to play that role, because Pep will look at them and think Foden's going to cause them the most problems. That's what I would have thought anyway.
Yeah, and also even the defensive midfielder, Allen generally has a good game, but he didn't have a good game against Southampton. I think he was taken off at halftime after a yellow as well. So that's something to be mindful about, because the guy they rely on in terms of shielding that defense isn't in particularly good form right now. What also stands out is when it comes to goal percentage involvement, Mahrez and Sterling are both north of 30% in terms of goal percentage involvement. So that's something to consider as well. So just to summarize, the three on your free hit would probably be Mahrez, Sterling, but you don't mind going Foden or De Bruyne for that second spot, and Cancelo.
Mhm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, or even Foden as well. I mean, like I say, he could just play, and his numbers are great as well. And at the end of the day, if he's playing false nine, he could do fantastic. And even if he's left side, he could do fantastic. But yeah, Cancelo, Sterling, and Mahrez are probably my preferred three, and I'm seeing a lot of that on Twitter as well. So I guess that's quite a lot of people's front three,
Just
or preferred three.
wh- while we're here, if you had to captain one of them, who do you captain?
I think I'd captain Mahrez just because he's got the penalties. It's always nice to have that insurance. Yeah, I think I'd be inclined to do that. Obviously, can take some of the free kicks as well, and he's just been in great form. And historically, his XGI is just through the roof. Most seasons, it's just minutes that we have to worry with him more than anything else. So I see no reason why he wouldn't go for him really.
All right, Zoff, any other questions from your end?
Nothing much. What about Sterling as a captaincy pick? That's what I was leaning to, because I feel if anyone's going to get a 20 plus over here, who do you think that'll be? Sterling?
Yeah, you could say Sterling. The other thing as well is if and we saw this in another game. I can't remember which game it was recently, but Man City went up quite early. They got penalties. Mahrez took them. They were 2 or 3-0 up, and then Sterling, who is the best player in the whole of Premier League history of winning penalties, won penalty, and he took the penalty himself. So he's also got that to add to his repertoire as well. And we know about Mahrez in terms of their position on the pitch. Mahrez obviously cuts in and usually either shoots if he's the opportunity or crosses to the far post, whereas Sterling is very much the man in front of the goal. So I do agree with that. If you take penalties, which are a luck factor, out of it, who's got a higher ceiling? I think Sterling has got the higher ceiling, just especially from open play. So
I
yeah,
agree.
again, it's fun.
Agree. Zoff, do you have that heat map at all that I shared with you in terms of Everton's chances created in Lampard's tenure?
No, I do not. I don't think I
No.
forgot to.
All right, cool. I just worth pointing out that we just had a look at that, and it's what 3 or 4 matches in Lampard's tenure, and the chances conceded heat map indicated that it was a Sterling kind of game because they do tend to concede a lot on that left hand side where Sterling's playing. So just something that I wanted to add on. And anything else to add, Luke, before we wrap up here?
No, just obviously it's not gospel. Make sure you've got a decent bench, even though the temptation to spend all your money just in case. And if they don't start, I think at the end of the day, if they come on for 20, 30 minutes, it's such a good game that it's not the end of the world, and we've seen that they can do well. That you can't not go for Man City picks, right? That's the end. I think it's a risk not to pick Man City than it is to pick them and worry whether they're going to play. So, and we're at the hands of Pep a little bit as always, but hopefully we come on the right side of it.
And where can our listeners find you if they want to check out your predictions for Manchester City?
It's just on Twitter at ffscout_Luke. I do sort of a weekly thread there, trying to predict Man City, like we said at the start. And yeah, just try to keep it up through the season. It's been going pretty well, and yeah, been catching some of the sort of I caught the Norwich rotation, for example, quite a lot of the players like there. So do occasionally throw out some mad ones like the Stones and Gundogan, like we've had this week. But yeah, check it out whenever you feel like it. Thanks for having me on, guys.
All
Pleasure.
right. Thanks so much for being with us, Luke. And we'll see you on Thursday. Bakar will be back for our usual pod, and we'll be doing that on Thursday evening. See you next time, guys. Take care.